Hello, hello, and welcome to this week's Nonprofit Marketing Mastery Power Session. I am so excited, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I'm excited. I'm so excited to have Andrew Neal here, who is currently the CEO of Outreach that's based in Indianapolis, to talk all about rebranding an organization. If you're joining us live, let us know in the chat box say hello, where are you? And if you want to go ahead and introduce your organization that you're with, that would be wonderful. So again, I have Andrew Neal here. A little bit about Andrew, and you'll see me looking this direction. I do have my notes over here. My apologies, but I can't magically memorize everything. Andrew Neal is a nonprofit CEO. He is a pastor, and he really is passionate about mobilizing the church to produce change. And I will tell you that one of the things I've noticed about Andrew is that he's really passionate about innovation. Not just mobilization, but innovation in any space and making everything he touches a little bit better, a little bit more efficient and effective. And so super excited to have him. A little bit about his background. Prior to joining Outreach, which he's been at for exactly 2 years now, 2 years and 1 month, I believe. He did spend 5 years at Brookside Community Development CDC, which is a gospel-centered CDC in the Indianapolis area. Through this, they really went from startup, and you'll see this trend in Andrew's career that it starts here and then it grows. So it started as a startup mind and grew and grew and grew to almost $1.5 million as an annual operating budget. Again, Andrew is welcoming his second year as the CEO of Outreach. And in this time, and this is not a small feat, in this time, he has grown the organization from $1 million operating budget nonprofit to just in a little bit less than 2 years, a $2 million operating budget nonprofit. And that means not something little, that means direct impact and lives changed of youth in Indianapolis that are facing or could be facing homelessness. A little bit I personally love about Andrew, and then we'll pick his brain so you'll see it for yourself. In the nonprofit space, you usually see two different types of leaders. You'll see the leader that is strategic, that is visionary, that is business-minded, and then you'll see the heart-centered, people-first leader. And you often see that leaders have one or the two as a clear strength. And if you meet Andrew, and everyone that's probably worked with Andrew says he has both of these so strongly that he's both of them. And that's so exciting. I'm so privileged to have him. I'm sure he's feeling a little awkward with all the wonderful things, but thank you, Andrew, so much for joining us on the Nonprofit Marketing Mastery Power Session today and talking a little bit about rebranding Outreach. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I love that I get to be here with you.
Yeah. So I want to start. Let's just start at the very beginning. Take me back. Why did Outreach decide to rebrand?
Yeah, great question. So when I came in 2 years ago, my goal was not to rebrand. I think a lot of times CEOs will come into a new organization and they'll want to make a name for themselves or kind of, put their mark on the organization and maybe push for a rebrand. But in reality, for us, it came out because a number of things started to line up. So when I came in, we started to do an analysis of the external consultants that we were hiring. One thing that we realized was we were kind of overpaying for someone to maintain our website. And there was a cost savings that we could execute if we simply switched our website up and then made it an internal controlled website. So that was a piece. And then we went through this process of revising our organizational values to reflect kind of who we are now as an organization. And that also aligned with a new 3-year strategic plan that we were developing. So it was like all these pieces came together. And we started to hear from our community through the strategic plan process that Outreach just wasn't as recognizable as we needed it to be in the community. And then, as we started to go through it, that led us to question, okay, if we're gonna look at our website, if we're gonna look at all these different pieces about how we present ourselves in the community, does our brand reflect who we are and our mission? And if it doesn't, then maybe we need to go through a rebranding process for Outreach.
Mm-hmm. I love we didn't just decide to do this, the outcome, right? We didn't just say we're going to rebrand. We were introspective. We learned. We analyzed. We did a pretty difficult, sometimes for an organization, self-assessment of where are we and who are we talking to. I love that. Talk to me a little bit about, what kind of hurdles did you have, and what was your biggest hurdle in going through the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think a typical hurdle is creating buy-in across multiple stakeholder groups.
Mhm.
For us, one of the most prevalent stakeholder groups is actually our staff, right? So we have some staff that have been here a long time, and
Mhm.
the outreach brand means something very deep and personal to them. They came in maybe when the organization was new and was starting to grow, and they have a lot of memories and moments tied to who outreach has been. Our volunteers are very tied to our brand. They've been supporting it for a long time. Outreach has been around for 26 years. So it has that longevity. It's a historical brand. And so anytime you start talking about rebranding, there's always a fear that, oh, well, what does this mean? Are we no longer who we were? And so for us, the challenge was, how can you bring people along in the rebranding journey so they feel like they are a part of, not being dictated to?
And how can you? And is there anything you wish you would have done?
I mean, I think that I wish we would have done, like introspectively, I think we followed a great process. It took us longer than probably my growth mindset, my power through, want to get it done attitude would have liked. But we ended up doing this brand. So here's some helpful advice for other CEOs. We choose to call it not a rebrand. We call it a brand refresh. And even just shifting the language a little bit helps. But we chose to do it over a few different stages, from shifting our branding to shifting our website to shifting our communication themes. And so that it wasn't too big of a shock. Part of me sometimes wonders, though, man, should we have just ripped the Band-Aid off and done the whole thing? The feedback I've gotten, though, has been this was a consensus building activity that left us very strong at the end and didn't feel like we were shoving something down people's throats.
Yeah, and I know for a lot of executive directors that might be listening that are maybe, I would suspect, Andrew, it's too. I know that Activator is my number one strength on Strength Finder. I would suspect it's within your top 4. That it can feel that rebranding can feel very difficult because it's not just a labor of slapping a new logo, redoing the website, going where you need to go. It really is a labor of bringing your community together, as Andrew said, right, and having those important conversations and maybe slowing down even slower than you would feel comfortable. That's too funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I bet you learned something about yourself during that process too, correct?
Oh gosh, yeah. And I learned that, it's important for me to have a good team around me, or else I'm just
Mhm.
going to try to shove something through. And that usually isn't the best way to get things done for me.
Right. Yeah. Well, cool. Did you two big pushbacks that I hear about rebranding, and actually I'll throw in the third, the one you just referenced. It's just too much. We don't have the staff and manpower to do all those things right now. So can you talk me through some of how did you combat that? You talked about different stages. Were there any other ways that you made it more manageable with a medium-sized staff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, great question again. So, we knew that when we started this process, we wanted to be preemptive about answering those questions, right? By
Mhm.
dealing with the pushback before it's actually brought up. And so, again, the whole idea was to walk key stakeholders through a consensus building process, not coming with answers. I mean, we could have guessed day one that this is going to lead to a new website, but in reality, what we did was we used that strategic plan as a listening process, to confirm what we already knew on staff, which was man, we are just not recognizable enough in the community. There's some major issues around our brand. So like a couple of different things that came out of it, very tangible things. We have a cross that's in our logo. It's been there from day one. That is a part of our identity and who we are. It speaks to the faith-based nature of our organization. But the cross was developed in such a way that as an icon, it could be misconstrued maybe like with the red cross or things like that. So how do you differentiate this primary icon was a big piece of it. Our tagline, it historically been hope for homeless youth. But just by the nature of our organization being outreach, the name in and of itself didn't communicate who we are or what we do. And so we needed to be a little bit more strategic around that. And so that process of listening to the community defined a problem for our board, for our stakeholders, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, we need to do something about this. And so that gave us permission to step into this rebranding process.
Awesome. No, I know for a lot of leaders, I think, we're talking about branding, but these are also lessons in leadership. I think we should have named this conversation both lessons in leadership and lessons on a rebrand. I will say, if you're joining live and you have any questions for Andrew, I know I have a long list. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat box. So we will make sure to get your question in front of him. He has a wealth of knowledge, and he's already been there. So if you're an organization thinking about the rebrand, and if you're not joining live, you're watching the replay and have a question, drop it down below in the comments, and I will make sure that question gets to Andrew. So what about money? That's the real reason. I'm not going to ask you how much money did you guys spend on your rebrand, but I know money and budget are a concern. How did you justify the cost for a nonprofit to spend money on branding?
Yeah, well, there were two different ways for us to look at it. One from a very practical dollar and cents perspective, which was I was able to show our team and our board, hey, we're spending X amount on this external consultant who maintains our website for us by shifting even the website, and by going through this rebranding exercise. Yes, we're paying more upfront, but over the long haul, we're going to be able to have control of our site. We're going to be able to, keep it as updated as possible. We're actually going to save money in the long run. And so for our logistics minded, operationally minded board members, I think that made sense. But also, there's when you talk about money, you also have to talk about value. And there is so much value, monetary value, that's tied to a strong brand and to strong brand recognition. We couldn't put an exact dollar amount on it, on what that would look like over the next 3 years, but we could sure estimate, what would it look like to have a strong brand that allowed us to grow our donor pool, that allowed us to have more community recognition that could result in future funding. And so for our strategically minded board members, I think that spoke to them. When you talk about longevity and what the future looks like, it becomes not so much a preference to rebrand, but almost a necessity to rebrand.
And I think that's great that you walked your board kind of through that process, and again, allowed them to see that was the right decision, as opposed to just saying, I want a new logo, this is what happens, right? Organizations come in and they say, I need a new website. I want a new logo. And there's no further thought in that than just what seems then like a want, not a need. And you made it a need, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. I will tell you you mentioned donors and you mentioned increasing. One of the things I think is great, and if people are watching right now and want to check out the website, outreachindiana.org, correct, .org, is that your brand equally connects and excites donors and the youth you're trying to reach. So I think it's equally, and I will use the term attractive, but like both of those key stakeholders are motivated, enticed by your brand. And that's not an easy thing to do. Did you get donors involved in the process? Did you get youth involved in the process when you were going through the rebrand?
Yeah, great question. Yes. So yes, we did. The vendor that we ended up working with, his name's Jeff Miller. He runs a company called Hello, This is Jeff. I have Known Jeff for a long time, have worked with him on other projects. One of the things that I most appreciate about Jeff is that he uses the story brand model. Some people might be familiar
Mhm.
with that, but it is a really good process to go through when identifying your story and how you were communicating to different stakeholders. And one of the biggest things that we learned through this discovery process, so how you usually work through it is you're identifying a main character, right? And the main character isn't your organization. That's the first
Uh-huh.
fundamental shift. Um, Typically, though, like you talk about this main character who has some sort of a problem, and then they meet a guide who gives them a plan. Um, Typically, we in nonprofits we make the main character the donor or the volunteer, and we're calling them to be the hero in the story, right? Um, we decided to shift that a little bit through Jeff's prompting. We decided to make the hero the youth. They became the
Mhm.
main character, and so our branding, our website, it speaks directly to the young person who may be experiencing homelessness. And we still have a secondary and tertiary audiences, um, but we really felt like if we could communicate who we are to the youth, those secondary and tertiary audiences would also learn about who outreach is and what matters at outreach. And that's why I think I am in love with our website because it speaks so directly to the people that we're serving.
Yeah, and I will say from looking at your website, I did check out. I went down the rabbit hole, and I don't know Jeff. This is Jeff, but I went down the rabbit hole, and absolutely, if you are going through a rebrand and looking for a website designer, and I'm sure you can connect with Andrew, but I would contact Jeff. Would be. Would you agree? Someone wonderful to work with and guide a nonprofit through the website design process.
Oh gosh, yeah, I love Jeff. I mean, Hello, This Is Jeff is a great organization that's helped a lot of people do that. Um,
Yeah.
because here's the thing, like doing the rebranding process, and he does the story brand model from the beginning, not just for the website, but also just for how you communicate about the organization and what your brand means. And so, if anything, it gives us some language that we can keep referring back to, even in our email communication or our social media communication. All of our marketing components can kind of gather around this philosophy.
So I'm going to ask you a question that's not. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you, and it's very specific. But I think other. Did you go through what was the process in selecting a vendor to guide you through this? Did you just recommend someone? Did you do an RFP? What like logistically? How did that look?
Yeah, so looked at a couple of different organizations to get quotes that I had known, and then walked the board through the decision making process. But at the end of the day, I think they trusted me to bring in someone who I was comfortable working with. Um,
Oh,
and so, like that's one of the things I've been learning about the nonprofit space is yes, we want to bring in competitive bids, but a part of that bid has to entail the trust that you have with that vendor. Um, because if you're not trusting, whether it's someone doing a build out or a physical capital build out, or someone who's coming in and doing a rebrand for you, you work so closely together that there has to be mutual
mhm.
trust. And I think that's something that we were able to kind of present to the board, like, hey, here's the options, um, but this is a known commodity and a valued relationship here, and what does that mean? But at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, um, I wanted it to be the board's decision whether we were going to rebrand or not. The board's
Uh-huh.
decision on who was the right person to help lead us through that. Um, because I know that if I make decisions by myself, um, I'm just not that good. I'm not that good. I need other people speaking into it.
Yeah. Um, so speaking of that, in addition to the board stakeholders, the vendors that did not only did the work, because often, and I want to like clarify, Andrew talked about finding a vendor that had a process for working them through the conversation. And if you're a nonprofit, I'm going to speak out. If you're a nonprofit and it's coming and saying, we're going to rebrand, we need someone to design a logo and do our website, you're already thinking about it the wrong way, right? You need someone that's going to approach the rebrand, guide you through it, help you decide what you need. And I think it's wonderful that you did it the right way. But nonprofits, I want you to hear that if you're watching this video. So you're on the other side of the rebrand now. Um, Is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's always, little things that we wish we could go back and do. I kind of talked earlier about like, yeah, do you go and do you pull the band-aid off and tell everyone that you are doing all these different pieces? Um, you know, we chose not to. How we kind of rolled it out, it really for us started with our organizational values, right? So
Mhm.
again, it's we're taking people on a journey of helping them understand how we're thinking through things. So we explain to all of our stakeholders, why are you going through this value process? Well, because we think there's so much more to say about who we are as an organization, and we want to be a values driven organization. So we need to clarify what those values are. Okay, great. So now that we have those values, how does it affect our brand? And so the stakeholders were being brought along in the process. It was like a 2-year journey to do all this stuff. But then it
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, great. We need to present a brand, and that reflects those values. And so then the next they see the brand, and then after that, it's like, okay, well, now that we've got a whole new brand identity, we need to see that reflected in all of our materials and our website and our presence. So they kind of knew what was coming next every step of the way. Um, it it was a long process for our development team and our communications
Uh-huh.
team. Um, and they were so excellent throughout it, because at the end of the day, listen, I'm fortunate enough that I've got a really good staff that can take the vision that we had and that they can implement it. For
Mhm.
me, coming from an organization before where we built it from scratch, there were 2 people. That's what we started with. We were involved in every single decision along the way. This was for
Uh-huh.
me. It was challenging to let go of the process and be like, "Hey, here's what we want you to do. You guys go run and do it." And man, they came through. Mary, our communications manager, absolutely killed this thing.
Yeah, and externally I feel the same way. I'm like a big I don't know Mary at all. I'm a big fan. Yeah. So
She's
cool.
awesome.
And yeah, what would be, and I know we've talked about recommendations kind of all the way through, but what would be if someone's thinking about it? Like say you're an executive director that's thinking about possibly rebranding. What quick recommendations do you have or tips?
Yeah, I mean, one, broaden the number of voices you're listening to, right? Talk to different
Mhm.
stakeholders. I think for executive directors, especially for organizations that are serving specific clients, take it to the clients.
Mhm.
Does our brand communicate to you what you know our organization to be? Um, take it to community partners. That was another part of the listening process that was really important, is hearing from community partners, what our brand reflected to them. um, and then bring people along on the journey. I think that's for me the biggest
Mhm.
takeaway is it's probably going to take longer, but you really are doing the work of consensus building. And at the
Mhm.
end, that is the difference between having staff and stakeholders excited and anticipating the next reveal of your brand versus being anxious about what you're going to bring to the table.
Yeah. And then they're the ones guiding the why, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah. And something that I don't think we often think of, like, oh, it involves other people. It's not just like a graphic designer, the executive director sitting down. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so these are questions, Andrew, that I ask all guests that join and are come on the Nonprofit Marketing Mastery Power Session. I apologize that some of them are very direct. But what's something that nonprofits do in their marketing that makes you cringe?
Oh gosh. When nonprofits put out false claims or misleading information, we do this a lot of times when we put out our statistics, or or we make the claim that, hey, we are the only organization doing this. And I see that and I'm like, yeah, but I can think of 3 other people who are also doing that. um it's just like, let's be real. Let's just be real.
Uh-huh. Okay. And then what's one thing you wish more nonprofits did with their marketing?
Oh, I mean, again, like I love when nonprofits are real, when they're real in client success stories, when they're real in the education that they do, when they're real in their message to supporters. I mean, I think the reality is people want to feel close to you. And in our society now, we value authenticity more and more, but we are also getting way better at sniffing out what is true authenticity. And so if you're going to go the authentic route, here's what I've learned is it's got to be more than just marketing. It has to also be how you show up in person. So if you're going to play the authentic leader on social media and then you're going to sit down with someone, you're going to be disingenuous, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah. Yes. I think this is the 6th nonprofit marketing mastery power session, and that's the 3rd time that's come up. The alignment of I don't know if it's a real solution or a real problem, but it's definitely one of the two, if not both. Okay, so final question, Andrew. I'm going to I'll drop Andrew's LinkedIn information in the comments if you're watching the replay. You can check out outreachindiana.org and check out the website, find him there. Are there any other ways people can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, get signed up for our email list. I think that's always a good way to hear. So you can go on our website, sign up for the email list, hear what we're up to. We're on the social platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Also, invite other people to connect with me personally on LinkedIn. I feel like I'm doing a lot more engagement with other leaders on LinkedIn. I love the platform, and it allows us to kind of share together the big wins that are happening.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. I'm so excited that we got to chat with you today. And thank you everyone for attending. And I look forward to seeing you next week for the next Nonprofit Marketing Mastery Power Session.